This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
We can ask people to be kinder and more accepting. That works to some extent, but if we are dependent on others to give us that feeling of belonging, we can still get emotionally hurt. It seems like a smarter idea to find a way to like yourself for who you are. Valeria interviews Briton Kolber. He is the author of Not Fishy Enough, a ridiculous parable about finding worth through self-acceptance. Briton Kolber is also a family therapist specializing in geeks as a special population. His first book, Not Fishy Enough, is for children and the adults who care for them. He has taught Applied Improvisation at SAGA School, General Assembly, and Aspiring Youth Ryther. He has done many odd things, ranging from Research Scientist Associate at Applied Research Laboratories to board member of Washington Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, to computer sales, to performing regularly with ComedySportz Austin, to working in the film industry in Los Angeles. In what little free time he has left after grand adventures with his family, he runs, skis, writes sketch comedy, has conversations with his cats, and tries not to set himself on fire while cooking, again. Meet Briton at notfishyenough.com. Here's the interview with Briton Kolber.
In your own words, who is Briton Kolber?
That is a mysterious question. I value joy, mischief, and understanding, and it's all kind of wrapped up in authenticity. So I'm a therapist and an author, and in my role as a therapist, I often describe myself as an expedition leader. You know, someone is coming to me to ask for help, and we go on this expedition into their emotions, into their hearts. And sometimes it's really difficult what we find in there. Yeah. And sometimes we have a lot of fun.
Yes, right. Both sides, yeah. And that's part of the exploration, isn't it, of self. What inspired you to become a therapist, Briton?
Oh, I don't know. I think I've been a therapist all my life. Some of my memories around 5 years old are around wondering what was going on around me. And my mom even came to me and said, you know, when you were 5, you said, I want to understand why people do what they do. Mm-hmm. And that's just been going on my whole life in one way or another.
Does it have to do with behavior or just everything?
Behavior, you know, when people are yelling at each other and they care about each other, when they're angry, when they try to understand and they just don't, when people do things that don't make sense even to themselves, it's very difficult.
Do you have any spiritual understandings of yourself or life itself?
Spiritual understandings. You know, I used to be in the Episcopal Church, and a lot of these sermons were very interesting. And subsequently, that pastor retired to become a Jungian psychoanalyst. So that gives you some idea of where the spirituality was going. And I've always felt a strong call to there's something else. And then I also have a strong scientific training to question and be skeptical. So my spiritual understanding is really a duality. There seems to be something, and I want to make sure that what I'm experiencing, I also run through confirmation bias. Is this verifiable? can you even verify it? So there's something scientific and something intensely spiritual and open to experience. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. You see, I have been looking for a philosophy, spiritual philosophy that could bring science questioning, would be open to that, and I found one. So it's basically Advaita Vedanta, I'm a student of Vedanta, is the science of spirituality. So it's very much about evidence, first-person experience. You can't. It's never about faith, trust, belief systems, none of that. It's knowledge and then experience. So it has been an interesting, very fascinating, I would say experience, because I have had experience, but in the end, it's not really an experience. When we go deeper into what this is, which we call life, the depth of it cannot be experienced, because everything that experience is made of, it's something that's cannot be seen, cannot be touched. So it's the invisible world. It's a substance that's invisible. So that's kind of interesting to come to that understanding that everything is made out of something that's invisible. So how can this be? So talk to me for a moment about the book that you have written, the first book that you have written, Not Fishy Enough, a ridiculous parable about finding worth through self-acceptance. What was the inspiration, but also the purpose of writing this book, Briton?
Oh, great. Okay, so the inspiration was really experiences with my clients. So experiences with clients are often about growing, and then often they would reach a point of uncomfort, of discomfort. Like, why is this so uncomfortable? And I came across this letter from Kurt Vonnegut Jr. That was part of an arranged play where people would read out different letters from people. And he talked about the process of becoming a creative person, becoming a spiritual person. And then I realized there's something about this becoming thing that's really important, and creating a different framework, a different story. So what if it's like these little crab exoskeletons I see on the beach, in the side pools and around the Pacific Northwest where I live? What if someone just gets too big inside, emotionally, spiritually, to be who they have been? And then you have to break with who you were. And it feels painful. It feels vulnerable. But when you can let that crack and go through who you were, you can be something better. You can be something even more. It's going to be vulnerable at first. It can be something even more. Does that make sense?
Yes, right. So what's the purpose of the human experience from your perspective, Briton?
Wow. I can't answer this question without going to 42, because Douglas Adams is one of the first sort of disruptive authors philosophically for me. So I think it's about people finding out for themselves. I know we're drawn to connect to people. I know we're drawn to think that there's more, and it seems like there is more. And so, what is it? What is people's purpose? I think you have to pay attention. Every one of us seems to have a slightly different calling, and I think it's important to pay attention to that. You start to trust yourself when you feel safe enough in your own head, in your own thoughts, in your own heart. Then people start to be open to, I think I want to make poetry, or I think I want to do more things with my hands. But if they're all intellectual, and not that intellect is great, but if they're just intellectual, they get lost and they stop trusting themselves. And so when you start to trust yourself a little bit, answers start coming. I don't know where the answers are coming from, but they start coming.
What is your personal idea of purpose? What is your purpose at this time?
My purpose is joy. Is living in joy, living in trying to understand things, but also having this keen sense of mischief. There's a little bit of trickster in me, not like evil trickster, but like, well, what if I challenge this? What if I add some play into this idea? Some people's emotional experiences are very, very sacred to them. And at some point, it's also helpful to feel safe enough to laugh at yourself a little bit. Maybe this is okay. And that self-acceptance is very important.
Yes, that's the topic of our conversation today.
Right? It all connects there.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I have heard that a lot. And it's, for some reason, it resonates energetically, like my body and mind responds when somebody says, the purpose of life is just to enjoy it. It's just to be happy, just to be here. That's it. We already fulfillment itself. So that really resonates true. So the purpose of life might be just this, just being alive, or the feeling that we are alive, that we're aware of the experiences we are having. But then, of course, we always want more, and we want to know more and all that. And then comes all the complex stuff, trying to be happy. And I think that's when we find ourselves in a lot of challenging situations by trying too hard. So talk to me about the idea of self-acceptance, and how can we do that in a way that we are not trying too hard?
Mm-hmm. Oh, not trying too hard. Well, self-acceptance seems to be about allowing. It's especially about allowing imperfection. Imperfection is something that a lot of us are really scared of, and we will try hard to keep it from happening. I mean, that's one of the things Edwin's story is about, is he's wondering, why is he like this? And so he's, he is a crab. He doesn't know he's a crab. And so he keeps trying really hard to be something that he can't possibly be. And so when self-acceptance becomes an option, like, what if I'm okay like this? What if I accept this? Then he starts to become more open to experiences. And that's kind of like what happens when you can talk, interviews of models, female models that are generally, often regarded as like absolutely stunning. And they will pick themselves and each other's like, well, I don't like my feet, or I don't, I think my hands look wrong, so I hide them. Like, what are you talking about? I've seen this with clients a lot. Like, if they don't have a place in their hearts that they are okay just the way they are, then you can say all kinds of kind things and it doesn't go in. They might thank you politely, but they don't believe it.
Yeah. Wow. So that now we are talking about the stories, the stories we tell ourselves and belief systems. And that's so interesting. I remember going through this as well, almost living for body parts. Like, oh, my hair is not good enough. And then the focus was just so much on the hair. Like, oh, it doesn't look good today, so I don't feel good. So if the hair was not good, I didn't feel good. And then I became a fitness trainer, and then a competitor. And then it was about now parts again. Oh, my stomach is not flat enough, or whatever it was. So it's fascinating how attention, it kind of drives everything. It's where we put our attention on that really makes a big difference within the human experience when it comes to happiness, from my perspective. So if attention is everything, do you also teach or guide your clients to into the practice of meditation and mindfulness, to be present in the moment?
Yes, absolutely. And some are open to it, some are not. But even in session, I spend time helping them notice where their attention goes and be more purposeful in it, less automatic pilot. In fact, I borrow a lot from people like Tony Robbins, who uses focus as also including your thoughts, but also your physiology and how you make meaning. And I find that if I use all three of those with clients, they really respond to it. Someone says, I'm really upset. Okay, where is that in your body? And as if you could point to it. And when they start thinking, oh, I have this ache in my chest, or I have this pounding over here, or my neck is tense, then they're in their body and they're starting to feel and experience differently. And that's a great doorway for meditation, where there's a kind of focus, and it's not just in the head, but there's this body kind of experience. And when you can start to do that and then feel safe doing it, this intuition starts to become available. You start to be able to feel safe and happy in your own skin.
I want to go deeper into what this life is as a whole, not just as parts. Maybe that's why I went spiritual, because I didn't want to focus on parts. But they cannot be ignored. And I do try to ignore thoughts that they are not in alignment with what I want my life to be, per se, this personal life, body-mind complex. But in the end, it's really being present to what is present that has made a huge difference. Whatever is present here, like talking to you now, this is the only thing that exists. This is almost like my life now, talking to you. There's nothing else. And that feels really, there's something about it. It's almost like, it's mysterious, but at the same time, there's a sense of belonging. Isn't that interesting? Within my own self, within my own inner world, it kind of, this feels great. So
Right.
home,
Sure.
here now.
Right.
Yeah,
And
you're about
there's
to make.
a lot that is, but we're just barely starting to understand about how the edges of physics are with the quantum entanglement or the quantum nature of particles. There's so much to understand that I still don't. But the possibility of particles to be in very different places and also be somehow connected. I think we're in sort of a proto-science. Like maybe there's a science to it. We just don't know exactly what it is yet, of like how you and I could actually feel connected. And maybe there's actually something measurable between us in this moment. Do it.
Yes, right. Well, according to Vedanta, there I go
Sure.
with that.
There we go. Great.
Yeah, it's consciousness. So consciousness, which is the essence, the substance of everything, everything's happening in consciousness. That's why it feels connected. Everything feels so connected. Body, mind, this relationship of body, mind. I know scientists try to find, it's consciousness happening in the body, like what came first, matter or mind? And then, according to Vedanta, it's obvious. Consciousness is, it's everything. It's, in a sense, everything is in consciousness. So that's why we feel connected with others and nature. I mean, it's undeniable. And even when we dream, everything is just it's so obvious now to me, of course, but that's because I have been training and doing a lot of practice to kind of be able to experience that. And now I'm able to get glimpses, and it's becoming a lot more, almost like there's just one reality anyway, which is consciousness, but it becomes, from the personal point of view, it almost becomes a dreamlike experience. That's what it is. It's almost like nothing can really stick, because it's almost like a waking up in the dream. The dreams we have at night, all of a sudden you wake up and you know that you're dreaming. And that's when the dream becomes interesting, because, wow, I'm dreaming all this. So it becomes fun. I don't know if you have had lucid dreams. I have had them.
I have, sure. They're interesting, yeah.
So this is basically, this is what it is now, this experience. It's just, it's a dream within a dream, or dream of consciousness. So consciousness fell asleep, and then we're having the experience, according to Vedanta. And I say that because it is a philosophy that is well established. They have science and non-duality. It's a huge conference, but it's not that big enough, because a lot of people don't know about it yet.
Right.
It's the science of spirituality as well. They bring it together. So with all that being said, it's what counts is, again, it goes back to the relative reality and how much of that perfume of the absolute reality we can bring to this, how much we can understand from the absolute, we can understand with the relative, thinking, with our thinking brains in the minds. What's the goal, really? And then, it keeps coming back. For me, it has been inner peace more than happiness, really. It's not about being joyful all the time and smiling and all that, but there's a sense of quietude. It's almost like everything many throughout the day. It's almost like there's no time. I feel that the timeless kind of almost this sense. It's real for me that there's no time or space. It's freedom itself, and it feels really great, and that brings me inner peace. That's what it is. So it doesn't matter what happens. I just kind of go back into that, or bring myself into that realm, and then it feels peaceful again, and it's expansive. So I'm able to take more of the challenges as well.
It sounds like a very balanced and peaceful way to be. I also have compassion for the many different experiences of the world. I think what you're describing makes sense to me, and there are people that will vehemently deny that that's possible or even real. And I try to connect with everybody. I try to connect with the skeptics of how can this be? Because that's not measurable. That's not real. Or how can this be? Because this is your subjective experience, but I have a different subjective experience. And I try to connect with all those worlds. Maybe there is, Carl Jung was very spiritual as a psychoanalyst, right? And so I have this perpetual sort of maybe that there is a collective unconscious, and there are Akashic records, and we all connect to something. And then there's how do I bring the people to their own realization, and join with their skepticism and listen to their fervent belief that this can't be true, and see if there's a way where we can come to an understanding together.
Yes, yeah. Really, what are you saying? It kind of, it's coming from a teacher, a guide. Yes, and that I love that openness, right? Because the more open you are, the more people you help. That's a fact. I guess from my experiences with my husband, for example, who a lot of times he says, you make me feel unintelligent just when you talk about these things. I have no idea what these are, Vedanta and all this. But then I also see that when I talk about it, but then when I don't talk and I'm silent, and I just go on doing what I do, I see that he has become a lot more, let's say, quiet within too, his own mind. So it's not really only about trying to explain certain things, because I don't think, some people are not able to understand because they're very, so much into their own mental world that they can't really go outside of that. They don't even know that exists. Right. No, of course not. We all at our own levels. I have no idea, Briton, why some people get to explore these things, at depth, and some don't. I see people in my family that I can never have this conversation with them. So I just sit quiet with them and I play whatever it is. And then all of a sudden they relax and they, and then we become very much connected at a deeper level, but without saying anything. So I don't have to say it. It's almost like, it's a silly thing to ask somebody, somebody who is happy, to ask them, are you happy? I think no one would ask that question if you are genuinely happy. So they will be happy with you. They start laughing all of a sudden too, or loosen up. And so I guess that would be, for me, it seems to me like that's the real teaching, when the real way, the most genuine way to pass these things on. It's almost like a transmission. It feels to me, because I have received.
Is being with them. What is that thing that you're saying about the real transmission? Of
being. It's not really, there's no thinking, there's no trying. You're basically, you're basically resting into the bed of inner peace yourself. So there's no, and it's so natural to you. And for me, it's not all the time, of course. A lot of times I get myself caught up with the mind content, and then I'm off that. And then it comes back again. So I see how that affects people around me. I have seen that clearly with my own husband. He's actually now interested in these things, which to me seems like, almost impossible. It seemed before. So I guess it's, of course, it's not to take away from teachings, guidance, the way you do in so many therapies. It's truly beautiful. I have enormous respect That's why I have these conversations anyway. I love them to talk about these things. It's knowledge, of course. But there's something about silence and just being that's extremely powerful, transmitting this truth.
It's quite powerful to just be with someone. That can be quite healing. And it's not just the idea of healing. It's like the physiology of connection is so interesting. So polyvagal theory is about the physiology that happens in your vagus nerve when you feel safe enough to. And when you feel safe enough, like I'm okay, and then maybe you're okay, something loosens, and there's this connection possible. Maybe it's an energy. Maybe it's something biological, and it feels like energy. I have my biases. I don't know exactly what's happening, but whatever it is, I know that it's measurable. The vagus nerve responds differently.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
the ventral vagal state.
Yeah, that would, because you see, because that, as I mentioned before, everything's happening under in consciousness. So yeah, when somebody is connected, or I mean, there's no one that's not connected. It's impossible, because if everything's happening under consciousness, everything is consciousness. But some people are more aware of. It's almost like consciousness being aware of itself. That's when something happens. Right? I can just leave it at that. Something happens. And then passes on. You said something in the book that caught my attention. I was also laughing about that. I mean, smiling. You said, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. Talk to me about that.
Well, that one is a quote that's been around the internet for a while. People are trying to figure out who said it first, but it's inspiring because it's about accepting, maybe you're like this, if you have, a lot of it's actually personal. For example, the way my physiology is, I tend to sink in water. It wasn't just my experience. Like even trying to take a scuba diving lesson, I had to take all the weights off because I would sink. And so I was thinking, well, what's wrong with me? And then there's like, no, you're just like this. And so if I believe that I'm supposed to be a certain way and I don't accept the way that I am, I might really be miserable, and that's Edwin's story. That's my story. That's a lot of the stories people I talk to, is there's this kind of cultural level supposed to, like, you're supposed to look like this. You're supposed to have this kind of figure as a woman. You're supposed, and then, for example, or you're supposed to look, like you have a square jaw and broad shoulders as a man, or you're not really, you're supposed to be. And all these things sort of intersect with this one little thing about believing, a fish believing it's supposed to be a certain way. And it's universal.
But there's something about the humans that we don't see a flower trying to be something else, or all the other animals, right? They don't try, but we tend to do that. So self-acceptance kind of inspires me to think about self-love, because I go straight to self-love, and then to me, like, self-acceptance under self-love, but who knows what comes first. When it comes to self-love, self-acceptance, self-liking oneself, are there levels, or is there actually a clear difference between these states of understanding?
Sorry, I'm going to confess that my mind wandered for a second, because there's something really important I'd love to get back to, if we can, about the self-acceptance, because it seems there's a tribal and selection pressure things. One of my dear friends was telling me about visiting a chimpanzee refuge sanctuary, and there was one chimpanzee that had both male and female parts of their anatomy and was rejected by the whole group. this one was off to the side, didn't get the same amount of grooming, didn't get the same access to food. And there was a tremendous selection pressure. Oh, you're not right. You go over there. And so there's something, I think, that is mammal level of like, you're a part of the group or you're not. And those selection pressures are vital and dangerous. They can put you in the group, or they can starve you and put you out of the group. And I think it's important to realize we have this pressure, and that even that ostracism is normal. It would be great if we can be more kind about it, more intentional about it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Right. You see, that is kind of sad to hear that, but it's nature, right? It's natural in a way. That's perhaps the reason. Well, I see how storytelling can do these things. It has the power to unite people, unite us. It has the power to separate us as well. What's the best way to navigate this world of storytelling? Which stories to believe in when it comes to the collective of tribes? How do you see that, Briton?
Which stories to believe in? I think it really starts with being aware of our tendency to want to create meaning on things, and to actually try out several different stories. Like you can look at the stars and make a different story. You can see it. Oh, this is a pot, or it's a bear. It's the same stuff. You don't even have to select the facts. You can just look at it and say, what else can I make out of this story? What other stories can I tell myself? This can be, I encourage people to be curious and try telling themselves a different story to see if that fits. You could be, someone's success could be, oh, well, if I got good news, that means something bad's going to happen. And waiting for the other shoe to drop is an expression I hear a lot. What if it's a different story? People like Terry Pratchett tell wonderful stories where he makes fun of people's tendency to make a story in the story. There's a kind of playfulness about, something like, there's a 1 in a million chance it might just work. And if they say it right, then it's going to happen. So you kind of play with conventions of the stories. And in that way, I think it teaches us to be a little more creative. I mean, the folklore is fascinating. If you look far enough, things like the Three Little Pigs, as I understand its function in folklore, is to teach critical thinking. Okay, this little pig builds a house like this. Okay, then what happens? This little pig builds a house like this. Then what happens? And so on. And in telling different, exploring little different stories, you start to introduce people to the idea of, well, there's another way to do this. Keep trying. Does that make sense?
Yes. Beautiful. Oh, what's not to love about that? Curiosity, being open to life, right? That's almost like it's childlike. You have kids, so you know that better than I do. So yes, that's really What can I say about just being open and seeing reality, seeing whatever is happening as it is? But that's it's easy said than done, because then trauma gets in the way, right? I was traumatized in childhood, and I know how much of that kind of informed my experiences until my inner and out experiences until I was 37. So that was a long time living under the delusion of seeing everything as a child, a traumatized child. That's such a powerful message, if we can be open. Easy said than done, because there's a process to it, and that's why you therapists exist. We need to reprocess a lot of that too, in order to almost rewrite. It's almost like we need to rewrite the story before we can live without them, isn't it, Briton?
Michael White calls this a re-storying. Narrative therapy, you take something that happens and try to create another story with it. And it sounds like that's something that might have been what you went through.
Oh,
is you
yes.
created a different story
Right.
for your life as you experienced trauma.
Yes.
How you experienced being, about concerned with these parts, as being a beautiful person. Oh, it's about my hair and about this part and that part, but you've made a different meaning out of it.
Yes, right. Oh, yeah, boy, lots of stories went on.
Right.
The
Right.
rewriting.
Yes.
And maybe that's why we talked off record briefly. Maybe that's why I came to a point where, I need to drop the stories now. It's time. Well, I was ready for it, and I just dropped them. But I don't know how much, I don't know how far we can go when it comes to the body-mind complex. I don't know how far we can go dropping belief systems in all stories. There's always something happening here in the background. They're always running, actually. But one thing I know is that now I'm aware of them. And I know they're just stories, and I just let them play themselves out. It's okay. And I'm not even listening to some of them. Some of them I do. They're still fun. What a fascinating experience this is, right, Briton? I have to say, to be a human, the exploration of this, it's just incredible. With that in mind, I do have another, you being a therapist, what is the goal of healing? Is there a point where, from my experience, the stories are still here and I hear them, but it's just it's not as loud, and I'm able to kind of let them come and go. But from your perspective as a therapist, what's the goal? Can we at some point say that we are healed from all these stories and even the rewritings?
I tend to be less worried about what I think and more concerned with the person I'm talking to. What's their idea of healing? I really find that when people are focused on recovering their own sense of autonomy, their own sense of safety, when it's about their experience instead of what I think it should be, it works better. So, what I kind of hope to urge people toward is generally something where they feel a sense of safety and autonomy. Wholeness is a really good goal. Feeling like they are okay just the way they are, and that they came from, even in the silliness of Eric Idle's always look on the bright side of life, there's a philosophy deeply etched into it. If you come from nothing and you return to nothing, what have you lost? Nothing. Even in that silly song, there's a sense of philosophy of wholeness is the point. Everything that's the suffering and the difficulty doesn't matter that much compared to the gift of being here and the gratitude for the chance to be here. And it's not to sugarcoat or spiritually bypass the difficulties you'll go through. It's to meet it head on and say, yes, it did happen to you. And it's not over yet. Can you be grateful? What if you can be grateful for what you have and then go to a sense of wholeness and safety? That's powerful for people.
Yes, it sounds very much. Yeah, that's a beautiful experience to have, of freedom. I remember coming from nothing, going to nothing. I remember, because you said this, I remember asking, I think my husband, we were walking, and then we were talking about non-duality and all that, and I said to him, what do you think happens, when we lose the body, finally, when this goes? He said, we keep dreaming. We talk a lot about dreams, so we just keep dreaming. We never stop dreaming.
Right.
If this is a dream, it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Right. And it kind of, something happened in that moment that it resonated. It's true. I don't know to who and where in the body, but something said yes to it. We're almost at the end. I do have the ending questions, but I wanted to go back to the what caught my attention in your book, and was a spiritual part of it. I have here, something that you said that caught my attention too. You said, my book is about the spiritual aspect of trusting and adventuring. So the adventuring, right? The exploration, just being curious. And that I remember when we just talked about healing, the goal of healing, you said that's very personal. And I remember for me the first step was to laugh more. If I could do that, then that would be my sign that I was, being healed from the traumas. And then of course, I became more ambitious after that. Now let's see, after laughing more, what will happen? So that sense of adventure, right? I guess that's where I am now, adventuring with the body, mind, learning new things, being open to whatever it is, of course, in a safe way, as you keep saying too. And your book is for adults and children, which is, to me, it was right away that message came to me when you talked about self-acceptance. Oh, that's for everyone. It has to be, especially children. So they learn that from the very beginning. And then under belief and religion, I have something here that I selected. You write, most of us believe in some kind of story that gives our lives a beginning, middle, and end, and a purpose. We can get stuck in the stories we tell ourselves and think that they are the truth. When we think we know the truth, we stop looking and learning about the world around us. We get stuck being me or sad or depressed. That caught my attention. When we know the truth, then we tend to not look for learn anything else. Talk to me for a moment about that. I have a different perspective in a way, but that caught my attention.
Sure.
I had to stop there. Yeah.
Well, when we talk about a sense of spiritual connection to things, I know a lot of writers do, that most of the last third of the book, the sort of discussion thing, came in one Saturday afternoon. I just started typing. I mean, it was years of experience and thoughts and things that were in my head, but it just came out. So there's a kind of immediacy to that. And fixed, your question, if I remember correctly, is this sort of fixed beliefs system that we get into. We stop asking. And I think that's the essence of a lot of the divisiveness in cultures right now, is we've come to a kind of, well, this is what I believe to be true, therefore it is true, and it's the only truth, and your truth is wrong. Any other truth is wrong. And that's when there's a kind of rigidity that sets in. This story must be true, because if it weren't true, then I would have made a mistake, or something's wrong with me. And so this is all about that edge of believing what you believe, and also being open to other people's experiences. And there's an opportunity for fantastic connection when we are open to another story.
Do you see the difference between religion and spirituality, Briton?
Well, it seems like the religion is about codifying things into behavior. It is about creating community. It's about creating, there are ways of creating good people. And there's a really useful social function to them. The spiritual seems to be they an important part of it. But I've also practiced, I've been part of a religion where people didn't seem to be present at all. And you would stand, sing the thing half-heartedly, sit down, stand. And then I would be around a campfire with people having like a really important conversation or singing a song. It's like, well, why does this feel so much more spiritual? I'm not in church. And so my understanding of these two things is that they can really overlap, and they can be very, very different. They're not the same. They just can connect.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It feels like the core of religion, of all religion. It's really that fundamental message that we are connected. It really always goes back to that for all religion. So, but that's, for some reason, it gets lost, the translation, and then it's not able to be really, that message is not able to, it's not communicated clearly. And then people get the wrong ideas of separation, and creates more separation than connection, fortunately.
I think it was in a book by Joseph Campbell where he was talking about a spiritual and religious conference where the monks who were involved in the practice as a spirit got along with each other and had interesting conversations. But the priests that were involved with the actual practice of relaying the spirit to the people squabbled endlessly. There's the spiritual practitioners are more interested in common ground, I think, at their core. And the ones who are translating it to no, this is, Jesus is like this, or he's divine. No, he's a person, or, all this stuff is stuff in the mind where we can get lost and find differences. Does that?
Yes, yeah, that's it. And even the idea that Jesus was someone who's very different from you, the way it is worshipped, the image, the idea of Jesus, which is very different, for me is very different than Christ's consciousness, which is all about love, unconditional love in connection. That's what really the ground for everything. But then the idea of the personified idea of God through Jesus, Buddha, and so many others, that's very dangerous too. Because then so many of us think that we are not worthy, that we cannot even be close to that. So most of us just give up. It's not even worth trying. So I have the ending questions, but I would like to mention a question that caught my attention too under discussion questions, belief and religion. Is one question that I asked you, say, does everything happen for a reason? What if it didn't? Would that be sad or make life pointless? That question caught my attention immediately. Would you like to make a comment?
Well, it's a thing that I see and hear a lot around me. There's this kind of rote way of saying, well, everything happens for a reason. And then, well, what if it didn't? What if there is a greater sense of consciousness or other things around us? But what if there's a certain randomness, and then it's your opportunity to do something with it? Because if someone's baby dies of some horrible disease, and everything happens for a reason, well, then you really, really want to find out what that reason is. And there's a difficult struggle. But if you think, okay, things do happen and they're horrible, maybe there's a kind of letting go of okay, this happened, and there are other things to do in the world, and there's, you can still make purpose out of it, in an existential way. But that is really at the heart of some of the life's more difficult questions. And I think it's okay to ask. Maybe it does happen for a reason, and maybe it doesn't.
I love your wisdom. Thank you so much for doing what you do. We need more of these guides and teachers and thinking minds that's going beyond thinking, even in a way. I'd step into the heart's wisdom as well. So it could be felt today and through your work. So thank you so much again, Briton. And I have this technical question about where to find you. But before that, I'll ask you this question. What 3 experiences you wish everyone to have before they die, before they lose the body?
Wow. 3 experiences. Returning to a beginner's mind. Starting with going, I think I know everything, and then going to, maybe I don't.
Yes.
Let's see. I mean, this is well-traveled territory, but loving someone and feeling loved in return. And laughing until milk comes out your nose.
Yeah.
Or whatever you're drinking.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Just a complete release until your belly hurts.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you so much for being you again, for being open to your beingness. Wow. Before we say goodbye, where's the best place to find more information about you and your book? I'll have the Amazon link to your book, but what's the best website to find you or social media?
Okay, well, the official place to find me is at notfishyenough.com. And You can also try BritonKolber.com, but that's a little bit harder to spell. So notfishyenough.com is a great place. You can find out things about the book, also connect to my website as a therapist licensed in Washington State. That also connects to my Instagram, things like that. So that's the best place to go.
Wonderful. I'll have those links on your podcast profile. Thank you so much for your presence here today. Bye for now, Briton.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Briton Kolber and his work, please visit notfishyenough.com.
To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.